that before we get too far. I know that that'll be a problem. I love that analogy of organizational culture to the Christmas photo. We have some pretty good Photoshop skills here, so we always joke that there are no crying babies in our world. Taylor, you're in a situation where you're changing organizational cultures, and you're now really moving into a world where you're responsible for how employees are interacting with organizational culture. So, in the current culture that you're in, how are they defining it?
So I think what Jeff said is completely in line with a lot of how organizations across the board, whether it's healthcare, financial industry, but I think a key piece that I didn't realize and something that Barclays really emphasize on is the transparency piece. You can have the same values, it can all align to the strategic plan, but if there's not complete transparency, there's always going to be small holes within your culture. People look to leaders to be transparent. So, okay, this is what our values are going to continue to be. This is what it looks like day to day. These are our responsibilities internally to really make sure that we're pushing our mission or our strategic plan forward. So I think transparency is what I've learned is definitely a really big key that maybe in past roles at different organizations, I never would have thought would have been a key in organizational culture.
That's so interesting. Joy, how about you?
Yeah, so similar to both Jeff and Taylor, and maybe said a little bit differently, I think of organizational culture as sort of the vibe of the organization, its principles, its personality. It can and probably should be somewhat aspirational, something to strive for, but at the same time, it needs to be based in and on realities so that the staff across the organization can see it as achievable and not too pie in the sky. An example of that would be at Pathway, we're a special education school. We view ourselves as a family, and the children, their families, they're part of the Pathway family, and we try to have that same approach to our staff, that Pathway is a community, a family, and so again, there's an aspirational component to that, but people who work in an organization like Pathway, they're not here to get rich. They're here to help kids and change the world. So that is an achievable, viable sort of org culture.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And we're going to be talking about how this culture and these cultures that have been created get communicated and how they connect with brand. But we have an early question jumping in from Janet Buchanan. And Janet, it's great to see you again. And Janet, just like Jeff, also is coming from a retirement community. And she says our marketing and brand efforts are prioritized to obtaining new residents and can feel rather transactional. She says it does not use common philanthropy and donor-centric language. Ideas on how to navigate this tension. And I love that word that you use, Janet, about the concept of tension. And Jeff works exactly in the same industry that you do. But Taylor and Jory also have experiences with organizations that both deliver a service that is very interactive with people, but also have the philanthropy side. And to me, like I find that one of the most interesting challenges when it comes to organizational work, as opposed to somebody that's purely just a charitable organization. When you've got to have that balance of serving the audience of your community or attracting people into it, like a traditional sales focus and that philanthropic, how do you balance that across your culture? Anyone want to jump in on that one first?
Yeah, go ahead.
That's a challenging topic. One area that really makes that far more challenging is if the marketing department is also the development department. Here at Peter Becker, they're two separate things, so that the marketing department can feel free to make their materials on recruitment. And then the development department, we look at our role here as relationship building. And so our role here really is to connect with residents, help them with what their needs are. The one saying that we always hear from residents about our development department is, you guys know everything. And the truth is, we just try to be the center of a hub to connect people with their needs. And so there's a handoff that comes between the marketing department when someone has placed into Peter Becker has chosen this as a home, they transition, and we try to engage in development before they become residents. So they know us through the whole process, and we're building a relationship, and the natural byproduct of that is people wanting to engage in the community in a supportive way. And so I tend not to look at our philanthropic efforts as being transactional. I tend to look at them as I make needs aware to people that I have relationships with, and they engage in them how they feel that they're able to. And in a lot of ways, they outreach what our expectations are then usually for them.
I love that idea that you're doing outreach and relationships with people that aren't even yet members of the community. So in some ways, the relationship philanthropy that you're doing is leading to people maybe even being open to the sales messages on the more traditional, we're ready to do this transaction piece now. I think that's so interesting. So for everybody that's listening today, I'm really curious about, how are your organizations structured? Are your marketing and fundraising groups one department, one person? Are they separate departments? And it's funny, Jeff, I feel like I've seen every combination, and I've also seen every combination work and not work, right? You guys have probably seen that too. I don't think that there necessarily is one right way to do it, but sometimes it's really about the people and the culture of how they connect to each other. The worst situations that I've seen, I found a lot of times to be at the university level, where it's almost like the head of development and the head of traditional marketing are like ruling two fiefdoms, and they each want to have control over the whole story. Like they want their message to be the one that's the overarching. But I've also seen it as a problem where one or the other is the boss of the other, and the decisions come down based on the way it's structured operationally, as opposed to the way it needs to be structured for the culture or for the audience. Jory or Taylor, have you guys had any experiences like that?
So I've worked in organizations where in a larger organization, you have a marketing department and a development department, just like you described, Beth. And there can be some headbutting there. I've seen it get reorged where marketing then gets put under development. And in the smaller organizations where I've worked more in the more recent years, I was marketing and development at my last organization. Here, marketing lives in admissions. It's not a department, it's a function that lives in our admissions department. And we have communications in my department. So we're working very collaboratively and hand in hand with our admissions / marketing person. And I guess what I would offer towards the person who asked the question is, you will have some transactional communication in any organization, and you will have the more philanthropic communications and conversations. The messaging can be done for both purposes, as long as the audience is always kept in mind. So, wherever that marketing function lives or communications, be audience aware and make sure that you're getting the support you need. If you're looking for marketing support, that is donor centric, whereas the admissions team, they want the marketing messaging that entices new clients to our school in our case.
So Jory, how much do you think the fact that it's effective at your organization comes from the technical structure of how it, like, this is the way it's organized? And how much of it do you think is because of the organizational culture of collaboration and the individual humans that are doing that job?
It's a great question, Beth, and I would say more of it, the success can be attributed to the culture and the people in the seats I am thrilled that I have a team that I work with. My peers on the executive team are all really amazing people, and I work well with all of them. And so from a development and communications perspective and admissions marketing, we're just really tight and working well together. The structure is what it is because we're small. We don't have a marketing department.
Mhm. Right. And I think that that speaks a lot to the fact of how critical, not just like your organizational culture is, but how critical it is to hire to your organizational culture. Your ability to work with these people is only as good as their willingness and their fit for within the way your organization works, which, Taylor's experienced going multiple ways, when what you want to do and what, how your brain works or how you think this job should be done is at odds with how the culture of or the mechanics of an organization is. It's not a good fit, and it's often it doesn't mean that one's wrong or right. It's just not a good fit. I often joke that my sister asked me once about whether she was a difficult person, and I said I really don't think people are difficult. I think combinations of people can be difficult. Combinations of groups of people or a person in an organization can just not be the right fit, and that's okay. You want to attract the people into your organization that are going to be all, rowing the boat in the same direction. So we have another question that came in from David Ragg. So David says, my former employer is a health and human services org. It depended for 90% of its revenue on government contracts and had one person in development and none in marketing. What should they do? So that's an organizational structure. The emphasis of the hiring of the organization was all about, the development side, nobody actually in the marketing side. What does an organization do culturally to advance itself in that situation?
Hire a consultant.
Yep. Thank you. Right. Maybe that's one option. Yeah.
It's a shame that marketing is undervalued in some organizations, and there's not a department or a person, but it's a reality in organizations sometimes.
And I think that speaks a lot to what Janet was just saying in her question about how sometimes marketing can get just labeled as the transactional thing. Like people get marketing and sales confused with each other. Taylor, do you want to speak to how that's shown up in your life?
Yeah, so I think that I come from more of a healthcare hospice organization, and they're very clinical focused and very development focused. And coming in, marketing kind of just slid right into development, but it really needed to be its own standalone department because it did a lot more than just create marketing for the development team. It really supported the organization as a whole. I would say in that situation, if they're so focused on development, there's a lot of people who have gotten pigeonholed in development, but they really are marketing, but there's been a lot of hybrid marketing development roles. So if they are open to hiring somebody else in development, look for somebody that has more of that marketing mindset, but can still function in that development role and who's okay with doing more of those execution pieces. I think the reason why I ended up leaving my last employer is I wasn't okay in getting pigeonholed in that way. Like, I'm a strategic marketer. I wanted to focus on that, but being part of a nonprofit, unfortunately, how their marketing department or marketing function, I would say, was set up is, yeah, you might be marketing, but you also do a lot of things related to development. And that was just something that I was like, no, I want to be more strategy and focus on that. So really kind of understanding that there is a marketing need and hopefully trying to fit somebody who can do a little bit of both.
I think that's great. I think it's great. And it's a really good point. And that leads us into this idea of Where's that line with doing a little bit of both? Many of you that are here today have been on many of my programs, and you might have heard me talk about this concept that I talk about a lot called the slash marketer. You know, you came in, how many of you have a slash in your title? You're the development slash communication director. You know, whether it's a literal slash or an imaginary slash, like you're the executive director, which actually means slash development director, slash marketing director, slash empty the trash cans. You know, I bet a lot of you that are here today are either in that role of having that slash, you were brought in to do this one thing, and now you made one change to the website, and the next thing you know, you're the communication director. How have you guys seen this issue that I feel like many of us are seeing in the nonprofit world, where these jobs are just bloated with, we expect you to be a strategist and make sure that the commas are in the right place. And we expect you to be a videographer and a video editor and a graphic designer and a writer and a web developer and a PR expert. And it's a lot of tasks, but it's also this wide skill set that I talk a lot about, how the strategic aspect of a job, the marketing planning, the coming up with ideas, the making sure that your tactics are aligned with your organizational goals is like a horizontal job. It's your job to look wide and horizontal and to look out. Whereas editing video and making sure that there's no typos is a vertical job, and it makes you look down, and the time that gets bled and the energy of like switching back and it's called context switching between those things can be really brutal. And I've seen a lot of organizations, you know, bring in a tactician and expect them to be able to think strategically, or bring in somebody that has reached a point in their job, in their role, in their career, that they're ready to be a strategist. And then somebody taps them on the shoulder and expects them to like load up all the events on the website, where they're sort of like, I hate to say it, but bait and switched in a job. What are you guys seeing when it comes to trying to hire? How wide are the jobs at your organization? How narrow? How are you managing just the massive amount of work and roles that get tacked onto a marketer's job, when the answer isn't hire somebody for each thing, because there's just no money to do that?
You know, that's a
Catch
interesting.
22.
Yeah, I've faced that problem in myself quite often, making the transition from being a younger marketer and development person. I wanted to make my toolbox as big as I possibly could make it. So I embraced every skill I could, whether that was social media skill set, whether that was Photoshop, whether that was videography. And as I've matured, there's a comfortability that I have in that skill set. I'm not great at it, but I feel like I know what I can accomplish. I know what I can do to bring it to task. But I realize that my success and growth as a development professional comes when I'm willing to step away from those things and focus more on the strategy. And part of it is experience, and part of it is, for me, I do a lot of outsourcing now. When opportunities come up that we need things, I used to step up and say, I'll fill that role. Now I say, I know a person that will do a good job with that. And if that is someone we bring in for a couple hours to do a photo shoot, if that's someone we bring in to do video work, and I find that my stress level in my job diminishes greatly when I was able to build that into my budgets. Now that's different in every organization. You may not have the flexibility to do that, but sometimes saying no with an option of how it can be accomplished can propel you farther in your career than being the problem solver, because nobody's going to move a problem solver ahead because their problem's getting solved and they don't want to look for somebody else to solve that problems in a lot of cases.
That's so true. But I actually just recently heard about, I just read this book. I wouldn't say it's fabulously written. It's kind of one point that's banged the drum a million times, but it was really effective in getting that exact concept that you're talking about into my brain. It's called Who Not How. I can't remember who the author of the book is off the top of my head, but it's Who Not How. And it's exactly that. Instead of thinking, oh, I can do that. You know, even in my organization, I have my team that I say, if you're overloaded, we've got an external team that we can develop and send work out to. But their instant is, I have to add this to my list. I feel like many people that work in nonprofits, I always say you have raise your hand disease. Like, I'll do it, I'll do that. And the next thing you know, you leave a meeting with an impossible list of things. It's really, really crazy. And it affects like the bigger things in an organization. Kara just posted in the chat that being in a position responsible for marketing and development, it feels impossible to be more strategic in marketing because time is spent just trying to keep up with all the tasks. You know, I'm sure you guys have felt that and your staff sometimes feel that. Trying to execute marketing and building relationships with donors sacrifices the quality of both. And so, you know, that's Kara's experience, but like, you know, it's funny, Jeff, you said you wanted to learn everything. So to me, I feel like the comments that people are making in the chat and what you're all saying speaks a lot to going back to staffing and hiring. You need to really find out, are you hiring somebody that's like, yes, I want to do all the things that inspires me and it makes me excited? Or when somebody says, I want to come in for a strategic marketing position, have you clarified what that means? Is it we're hiring you with a title of a strategic marketer, but actually you're going to have all the tasks that you have to do too? There may not be anything wrong with that. There may be somebody that says, yes, that's exactly what I want. But like what Taylor was saying earlier, it's that lack of transparency that sometimes I call it hope marketing. Well, let's just get this person in and we'll give them all that stuff later and it'll be fine. You know, that lack of transparency, I think, is contributing to people like bouncing in and out of a job thinking this isn't what they promised me, or this isn't what I thought it was going to be. So
You're 100% right.
yeah, this is say Taylor. Yeah, go ahead, jump in.
Yeah. I remember similar to Jeff, like I've always jumped in. I wanted to be a jack of all trades. Like I can do a little bit of social media, a little bit of design, stuff like that. That comes from professional experience, volunteer experience. But as I moved up into my roles, I've learned that I want to be more specific in what I do. And I'll never forget my previous role. I sat down and I'm talking about all this marketing strategy and promoting a development event on social media. And my boss looks at me and she goes, well, like, what are our dollars going to look like after this event is over? And I'm looking at her like, I have no idea. That's not my job. And she's looking at me like, you obviously don't know what you're doing. And that's where that blurry line really is like, no, a lot of people just don't really, I feel like 100% grasp what marketing is and what it can be that can differ from what development is. And I think that's something, as the world continues to change and social media gets bigger, I think that's a line that people in nonprofits are really going to have to separate and say, hey, no, we're going to need a dedicated marketing person and a dedicated development or fundraising person. But I'll just never forget that, because I'm looking at her like, this is not my deal. Like, I can't give you the answer, but like, I created this whole strategy, but she was only worried about the number. And it just really showed me like, okay, I might be a jack in all trades of marketing, but if I really wanted to keep doing that job, I was going to have to become a jack of all trades to include fundraising as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that clarity can be really helpful. That
Yeah.
actually speaks a little, what you were just saying, speaks to a comment that Pawan just made in the chat as well. She said many times people think marketing is posting on social media. And marketing is a lot about strategizing what to communicate, how, and to whom. So in your organizations, have you ever had to, be the voice of explaining what the role of brand is, what the role of marketing is, and like why it's even important? Jory, why don't you speak a little bit about that?
Well, first, just to backtrack, I would say that probably being the oldest, I would like to say most senior, but then that would get muddy. So the oldest person on the panel, I can remember before faxes, there were telexes, and I was in international business and people typed on a telex machine. So you can see where I've come from, the dinosaur age to today. I would just say that in today's business world, everybody's much more hands-on, everybody's much more nimble. It's a necessary thing that you can do a little bit of this and that. And David, yeah, I know David remembers telexes. He might be older than me. That we need to be nimble. You know, we had secretaries back in those days. Now we're all our own secretaries. So to have the ability to do all of these things is a good thing, but then to be able to manage up or manage your situation, you know, honestly, you need to be bold and manage up, and whoever you report to, make sure they understand that if you want this done, then this may not get done, at least not by me, and get the resources that you need. I'm sorry, Beth, you posed a different question at me.
How does all of this connect to brand? You know, because now I'm like,
Brand,
that's not
right.
it. Yeah, exactly. So the
Yeah.
brand and all of these things. So, you know, we'll move on. We'll talk about culture. Like, so we've got the culture of your organization. And I wanted to make sure that we talked a lot about today about what's going on in the world at the moment. You know, there's all these new terms, the great resignation, the quiet quitting, all of these different words that, you know, that people are branding to come up with this transition of people leaving the workforce, leaving jobs, changing things. As somebody that, you know, really truly believes that brand is the glue that connects your mission to your marketing, how do you think your organizational culture plays a role in this overall branding focus, marketing focus, in your ability to attract everything, attract the right staff that you need, then the amount of staff, attract the right donors, volunteers, and for many of us, like, people forget that nonprofits sell stuff too. There's plenty of people that are both trying to raise funds and trying to, you know, close contracts, attract members, patients, residents. There's all of that. So, you know, in a world where things are complex, how does the culture that you create lead to you being able to deliver on your brand?
I'll just jump back in there because, you know, we're a school. And so we have teachers who have been on the front line during the pandemic, and it's been tricky. But our brand message of being a family, of being an accepting and nurturing environment, we extend that into our hiring practices. We extend it into our recruiting practices. You know, if you look at our messaging for our job postings, or our messaging for donors, or our messaging for enrolling families, students, it's all pretty consistent, and it's about Pathway having been a caring and nurturing environment for students who learn differently for over 61 years. And so I think, you know, yes, 100% your brand needs to be, hopefully it's remarkable, you know, what your brand is, and that it's memorable, and it's believable, and it's relevant in today's, you know, challenging environment that we're in. It's really a buyer's market for the employees. And we are selling all the time, whether we think so or not. And everybody in every role at your organization is selling and needs to understand that they're a brand representative and a salesperson on behalf of the organization.
Absolutely. And I feel like a lot of times, as part of either a strategic planning exercise or a branding exercise, organizations also often develop things like values. And then once that exercise is done, they end up on a poster somewhere or something. And I feel like if those values aren't pulled off that poster, if they're not things that can be rattled off very easily. I was so excited with somebody that I just had a really great conversation that we're going to be posting into our members area on Nonprofit Toolkit soon, with one of our clients we did a rebranding for back in 2010. And she was able to rattle off the brand positioning and rattle off this is why we do things off the top of her head. And she's a brand new CEO. She wasn't even there when we did it. And I was just so thrilled to see that this stuff that these exercisey things that we created got like permeated into their culture, so that somebody brand new 10, 12 years later is still seeing how they're showing up, but it's got to show up in your reviews and in your, and all the different things. So Taylor, as an organization and in a that's large, and you have a dedicated role in employee communication. How are you seeing things like the way you do things, your manifesto, your values, be, I guess, be embedded more into things than just being, a poster on a wall by the elevator?
Yeah, so something that is really unique to Barclays is they have this game plan that they make sure whatever announcement that is organization related, product related, that news is front and center for the employee, but how it ties to what our values are, what our mission is, why we do what we do to make sure that our partners and their customers remain happy with us. And so continuously tying that into any message that we have internally is really important. It's kind of in your face, but it's how we apply those values instead of just having them on a poster. It's showing, hey, we've gained a new partner and this is how it applies to our values and what is really in the heart of our business.
I love that. Michael put a really great comment on here. Michael O'Neill says, I think these questions can connect to brand from the perspective of how do we make sure audiences are having a consistent brand experience across marketing, development, and other areas, either by making sure one person or team is handling them all, or not too overloaded to deliver on all those fronts, or by making sure that different people in departments are divvying up work. So, Michael's been to many of our programs, so he knows that I'm all about clarity in your audience focusing, figuring out who needs to be in the center of your circle, because you can't necessarily serve everyone equally. And I feel like one of the things that the past 2 years has shown us is that staff is a much bigger audience than any of us ever thought about. So how are you seeing in your organizations you helping staff understand your values, understand your brand, and help, be a little piece of delivery of that? Is your staff excited about being part of the ecosystem? Do they feel resistant? Do they feel like that's my job is to be a nurse, that's not my job to do that? And are you doing anything in your organizations to help either hire people that feel that way or to shift that perspective and begin to turn your staff, your team, into ambassadors for the work that you do? Drury.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So yes,
That's what you get for nodding your head.
Our staff are all those things. Some are engaged, some are disengaged. No, I would say we're fortunate that the majority are engaged, and they're, I would say, pretty well bought in to our brand and our identity. And who wouldn't want to be if you're here to change the lives of kids and help them, their families, and the communities where they live, which are, overlap with the communities where we live. But there are always a small subset of people who are sort of, I'm here to do my job, and when the day's done, the day's done, and moving on. But we do a lot of communication with our staff, and we do a lot of staff engagement activities. I think I would like us to be able to do more of those staff engagement activities, but we don't have a huge budget for it. But we'll get a food truck come out and do. There was this crazy, amazing gourmet donut food truck that we had out on our last set of in-service days, and we'll do things like that. Other little perks for staff, and we can offer spot bonuses. Any manager can give a spot bonus to any staff, and these aren't huge amounts of money, but they're gift cards or small or the credit cards with a dollar amount on them, or Amazon cards, and people love being recognized, even if it's $25, $50, $100. So yeah, I think that and last thing I'll say is our CEO, who I work directly with and support him on his communication internally and externally, does an amazing job of broadcasting the messaging and what we want to be as an organization and how we want to support you, and so on and so forth. So those are just a few of the things that an organization can look to do to keep as many of the staff engaged and on message as possible.
I love that idea of spot bonuses. I mean, never underestimate the power of a $10 Starbucks gift card. It's amazing. That it reminds me of, if anybody's ever read The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, one of the things that he implemented was a policy that any of his employees, because they were in customer service, any of his employees, if they could fix a problem for $250 or less, they should do it without ever asking permission. Any problem that can be fixed for that amount, chances are, is going to make a lover out of somebody that's really angry. And the power that it gives somebody to not have to ask if it's okay that they do this, that every time they have an idea for what could make something better for somebody, they can just do it. I can't imagine what that feeling of empowerment. And these are like, it was for customer service, people that answer the phone and deal with employees. A lot of times I think that we focus on, the engagement of people at upper levels, but, a lot of you guys work in situations where the people that are the most customer facing, that have the most public, impact on delivering your brand, are often sometimes the lowest paid people in an organization. And that can be really, really challenging. So what are some of the things that, Taylor and Jeff, that you're doing with your staff? I mean, the last 2 years have been hard. What things are you seeing that you've been doing that have really worked to help your staff members feel, just feel valued and like they want to be part of this team?
For us, we had tremendous turnover during COVID, to the point that at times you would see people here for 2 weeks and then they'd be gone in our dining team by their own choices, moving on. And we were desperately trying to retain staff. And I realized that the skills that I have in development of building relationships, and messaging, I needed to transfer those skills into engaging new employees. I needed to seek them out, to build relationships with them, to understand that my interaction, encouragement, and engagement across the whole organization was going to impact what they thought of the work environment. And my encouragement of them also, subtly setting the expectations. I feel is one of my strengths is writing skills, is my ability to share a message, to share a vision, and to be able to take a few minutes with an employee while they're working on something and just share how impactful their job and their role is on my success as a development director. I spent a lot of time with our receptionists here, talking with them and just thanking them, encouraging them, because their interactions for donors that come in our door or residents that come in our door, they have more interaction than anyone else in our organization. And
Yes.
and it makes a huge impact. Not to get off track here, but Wawa just spent millions of dollars to revamp their food menu. So at night they do all different foods. And it's funny, when you go into Wawa now and you order a meal, they have a buzzer that goes off when meals are done that is so deafening that it wrecks the cultural experience you're having in there. That it is unreal. My kids are sitting there with their fingers in their ears. And it's funny is that experience that person is having, getting that food, is the same experience your donor is having when they call in because they didn't get an acknowledgement letter and they deal with a person on your team or a person in the organization that's challenging, or they can't get through our call grid to get to the right person. All those things is a buzzer that says, oh my gosh, is this really worth it? And that's the worst situation you can be in. So looking both internally at how people are presenting themselves and also your processes goes a long way to engaging that experience that your end user, whether that's a donor or your own employees are having.
That is so true. My son basically just had that experience trying to get gas turned on in New York City in a new apartment. And it's interesting, what you have to put up with when there aren't any other options. Like, you can't just be like, I'm going to choose a different gas company. But for all the rest of us, there are choices. There are choices that people spend with where they go to school, where they go for their retirement, where they give their money. So it's really fascinating. So Taylor, in a department that is completely focused on employee communications, what is your new team focusing on and feeling is the direction they want to go? Like, it's so wonderfully valuable to have somebody that has I don't want to call it luxury, has the ability to really maybe expand out a deep employee communications, employee engagement plan. What are the things that your team is most interested in focusing on?
So we focus on really making sure that whatever is happening internally is really promoted. So we have a whole team of just curated experiences for our colleagues, whether that's promotional things with different products or just Juneteenth, just different celebrations. And what we do is we take what their event is and we take it and promote it and we really push it out and say, here's what we're doing. This is why we're celebrating. And it's amazing. Like just Sushi Day, it's so many we're so people and colleague focused here that it's so easy for us to be pushing out these internal communications of like, hey, look what we're doing because we're always doing something. Whereas my last job, there was not that luxury with COVID being healthcare, healthcare, there's still procedures and policies in place that you have to uphold for the health of your colleagues as well as the patients, where thinking about how to really continue to build company culture look completely different than what it looks like in a financial industry. So financial industry might be doing really big in-person events, where when I was working in hospice, it was like, instead of like Nurses Week, okay, instead of having a branded t-shirt, let's get a t-shirt that has a really cute saying on it for nurses with the stethoscope. And that went over really well because it was like, we might not be able to throw you a big celebration, but here's something that you can actually wear outside and not feel like, oh, well, this is branded, I'm really just only going to wear this to work. You can go ahead and wear that publicly as well.
I love that idea. It's like the thing that I always try and say, like in donor communications, is that no one cares that your organization exists. They give to you to facilitate their own dreams. And I feel like sometimes we forget that with staff, that like people often think that because you work for a nonprofit, that you're like passionate about the nonprofit mission. And a lot of times people that work at the nonprofit, that's my first job. I'm working nonprofit communications because the first job I got happened to be at a nonprofit. But to me, I was a graphic designer and I needed a job. And this is where I am. I've come to love it. But at 22, it was a job, and it wasn't until I was really onboarded to and the fact that they were willing to say, okay, not every moment needs to be about promoting us. This t-shirt is about promoting their value in their work and their connection with what they do. I love that idea because that
100%.
often gets forgotten so often. I also want to come back to this, what you just said about celebrating Juneteenth, and that it's not just about a sushi day and come down and have free sushi, that a lot of the employee engagement is about an organization figuring out what are important moments in the world to their employees, and what are things that they feel they need to participate in and weigh in on. I feel like when more awareness of social movements and diversity and inclusion started coming up, there was that moment where all of a sudden everybody put a black square on their social media pages for a day. And I would bet 90% of the people that put them up did nothing else but put a black square up on their page. And so how are you all navigating the world's interest, your employees' interest in this personal mission centric, in people's greater awareness in how society and social values should be represented within part of a brand culture or not. Because, putting up a black square and doing nothing else doesn't actually change anything, and could sometimes, there's that, you don't use the word me too, because now that has its own movement, but sometimes when it comes to participating in these things in the marketing channels of an organization, there's this perception that you can just take an isolated action and check it off the list. How is that behavior rolling down to your culture, or how are you guys in your cultures trying to do things that just fit better with who you are and who you want to be in the world? Jeff,
So
I was
outside
gonna
of
say, yeah,
more, I
Taylor, I
guess,
know that
the
this is something that is
professional, I know this is
near-
something near and dear to my heart. So outside my professional life, I'm the incoming president of the Junior League of Wilmington. And so it's not a workplace, but we kind of operate as a workplace since we have committees, we have a board. And something that I was very pounding into all of our members is it's not just good enough to put a black square up. So I was the communication chair back then. We decided not to. Instead, it was messaging of we're acknowledging what is happening. We're here for those, groups of people who it's affecting, but here's a ways of donating. Here are ways to get out there to actual groups who are able to make a change. In the Junior League of Wilmington, we have an initiative that we're focused on, so we're not necessarily able to shift how the world shifts political wise, diversity wise, but it's like, hey, we want to show that we are empowering our members to go out and be like, you know what, I want to make a change. Here is where I can donate. Here's who we could support, but basically facilitating that and saying like, hey, we acknowledge it, but going a step further and saying, we're going to empower you that if you want to help, here are the ways that you can go ahead and do so.
Awesome. That is phenomenal. So Katie asked a question and she said, do you have any advice for building up a brand culture once staffing stabilizes after a high turnover period? So Jeff, has your staff stabilized?
It has. We're seeing retention. Big thing for us was re-engagement of high school students in our dining team.
Mhm.
So that was big. What I think is contrary to a lot of way organizations look is look to see who in your overall staff has good relationship skills and understands your organizational culture. People that may be in different departments but they're people that get things done, that everybody knows who they are and who have strength of character and portray who you want. And look for opportunities to put those people in front of new employees, existing employees, and do that in a timely manner. And have them share what they're excited about, why they embrace this value system, why they embrace this culture, and promote the brand of the organization. And what you will find is that the employees start to mimic that. The ones that want to engage, the ones that want to be engaged in the organization. We always have a percentage of employees that are there to get a paycheck, as Jory said. And it takes a lot to turn those kind of people. So your energy may not be as well vested in them. But, when you have new employees coming in that are very engaged and you're able to mold in some way, realize that if you've had a lot of organizational turnover in the past, you need to be proactive in putting the good examples there, because they're not going to naturally glean that from the staff the way they used to, because your percentage of old staff may not be what it used to be.
Exactly. I love that. And we just have a couple of minutes left. So I just want to touch on one final tactical topic when it comes to connecting, branding and getting it out there in the world and this cohesiveness. So in some cases, there are other people than the marketing department that has to deliver communications on behalf of an organization. Sometimes it's development teams, sometimes it's board members, sometimes it's volunteers. So sometimes, as much as us marketing people like to have complete control of everything, with these small staffed organizations, you sometimes have to like let go a little bit and get it out there. How are you supporting your constituents that you have in your ecosystems who need to create content that is visually on brand, that is messagely on brand, that is, whatever, fundamentally branded? From a tactical perspective, besides just like getting people to buy in, how do you put the right things into the people's hands and help them understand how to use it and why it's important to use it? And I know, Jory, I know this is something that you've done a lot of work with. So would you like to start with that?
Yeah, sure. So as long as you have a process, I think that's key. Your process doesn't have to be what we do here, but we are the brand cops for the organization in my department. And I have a very small team. It's me plus 2 people, and one of those is a communications specialist and the other is a development associate. We set up a process a few years back where any communications going external from the organization need to pass through our department, at least to get eyes on, for 2 primary reasons. And you touched on them, Beth. One is, are they using the right logo? Did they stretch the logo? Are they doing something that's just one of those no-nos? And because we have changed logos over the years, and we make all the logos available through an employee portal. So they just went there instead of going to an old document, they'd probably be fine. But the other piece is grammar and messaging. I mean, we're a school, and I've seen some pretty dicey grammar coming out in some of our communications. So we do a scrub on the communication before they go out, and that's for the majority of the communication here. We also, interestingly, I had a staff, a supervisor level staff reach out to me this week asking for a script that he could use when making cold calls or any outreach on behalf of the school. And frankly, I should have had that script before. I've done things for the board members when we're asking them to go out and solicit their friends for the event or whatever. But I created a script and I gave different options within the script depending on what you're reaching out for. So if you can build a library, even if it's tiny, of assets that you have readily available to give out to people, and then put some kind of process into place where somebody is looking at the communication before it goes out and embarrasses the organization, I highly encourage that.
I think that is great advice. And we are actually at time now. I want to make sure that I don't keep everybody over. Thank you all so much, Jory, Taylor, Jeff. This was a terrific idea, Jeff. And I'm so thrilled that so many of you came to join us and ask such terrific questions. I really appreciate having you all here today. We are actually teaching our next class on conducting meaningful brand research next Thursday. So keep an eye out for that. It's right about the middle point of our branding fundamentals and essentials class. So I hope that or maybe another future class that we have will be interesting to you, and keep an eye out for our next community webinar program. These have been so much fun to do. I so appreciate having a wonderful groups of friends and colleagues to talk to, and I even more appreciate not having to make a slide deck. So thank you guys here for joining me today. I hope this was helpful. I hope you got some great things out of it. And I so value all of you for contributing to this discussion. Thank you all for coming today, and we will see you all next time. Thanks. Take care and bye-bye.